Thank you so much. The first thing is to realize that when we talk about HIV, we talk about LGBTQ and issues relating to gender, we are talking about human beings. Yes. And human beings that are created or who bear the image of the Creator. Secondly, it's to move from myths to evidence. There is a lot of things that are still surrounded by, the thinking is surrounded by myths or illusions. And yet, there is a lot of evidence that continue to emerge that we neglect. And because we say we are religious, we say revelation stopped perhaps at the end or the death of the prophet. And yet we continue to realize that revelation is progressive. And lastly is we need to move away from our entrenched positions and become as open and accepting that realities will hit our faces. And once they hit our faces, that's how God encounters with us. And then we need to be appreciative of the fact that that's the revelation that we'll continue to look for. Thank you.
Just one thing I forgot to say, the last question, what have I done? Myself and my community, I feel I have done a lot of contribution, both from grassroots, national to global. I have initiated a grassroots initiative at that level. I have responsibility at the national level in my country, like being the vice chairperson of home-based caregiving in Uganda. I'm a member of so many coalitions, including Domestic Violence Coalition, Human Rights and HIV/AIDS Coalition, Maternal Mortality Coalition, so many coalitions. I have not only done that, but I have been a panelist at international conferences. When I spoke at the CSW in 2009 at the UN, many people spoke, but I was at the high-level meeting. So it gave birth to CAN, Caregivers Action Network. I'm lucky to have spoken last year at the UN high-level meeting on redesigning Millennium Development Goal 6. So I feel I have made my contribution. And it's all about speaking. I don't pride about talking about my lifestyle, what I have gone through, but I feel so happy that when I talk, it opens many people's eyes to understand that life doesn't end at testing positive. You can still be very useful, and then it gives hope to many people.
Well, what I think is that people should wake up to a realization of the strength that they have in their hands, and it is a realization that I woke up to one day. You see, coming from the background of the media, you don't know the power that you have. But power is nothing without control. And a lot of times we've got people who've got power, but just do not have the control, or do not know that they have to have responsibility to control that power. I will tell you that running a tabloid newspaper that I do now, coming from a family paper, there's a lot of sensationalization. You want to sell the story, you want to sell the paper. It's all very well and fine until one day it happens to you. And I woke up to that realization one day and caused an international storm when I was accused of having been found having sex with some chap in Namibia when I had traveled with my president. And I got a lot of calls from a lot of different people. And I got to know of it through these pseudo-internet websites. I was shocked. I was discouraged. I was hurt, I was broken. And that is when I knew what the other person feels when we don't do our job right, when we do not fact check, when we do not exercise control over the power that we have. And that is the same thing with the churches. Because when you're standing at the pulpit, you should know that whatever you're going to say will impact generations to come. Because, for example, I woke up to that realization that this is what has been written about me and it broke me. But yesterday, I got a call from home that my son had lost his tooth and he said he wanted me to know. But one day my son will wake up to the net. He will go on Google, look for his father, and he shall come across that irresponsible story and it shall break him again as it broke me. And 3,000 years from now, 1,000 or 1,000,000 descendants from me, somebody will wake up again and have their heart broken because somebody somewhere did not exercise control and responsibility over what they have done. Oh, and that's the power that they have, that they misused. Which is sad, and it's sad that it has to happen to you first so that you realize what you're doing to others. It's sad that it has to be your son one day so that you know that this creature is actually human. It's sad that that's the way we have to go, but that realization of the power that we have, that has to be the first step. And it applies to everybody, especially the people who are at the forefront of this battle. And that is the church, because everybody's looking at the church. Everybody's taking a cue from the church. And that is what I think is absolutely important. What have I done? Well, right now we are in the process of setting up a website where those who are wronged in mainstream media can come and have that as a safe, open space. And we're going up and down to look for funding to make sure that that project comes to life, comes to fruition. Because if you're not going to get fairness in the mainstream media, you need a free space, and that's what we're creating. Somebody said, how do you send messaging in the media to MSM in a country like mine? And I found a perfect way of doing that. Because there were issues of anal sex, and how do you write anything about a microbicide? And say, oh, we also need a microbicide for anal sex. Because the question is, what are you doing there? What are you looking for? We've got conventional ways of having sex. But unfortunately, we've had situations where girls in certain parts of the country have been going for virginity tests, and they've been testing perfect. They're virgins, but apparently they're having anal sex. They're preserving their virginity for society, but they're making money through having anal sex. And the moment you talk about that heterosexual sex, but anal sex, you're automatically sending a message to the MSM community, because they're reading in and they're getting feedback. Yeah. And fortunately, or unfortunately, but I think fortunately, in my country, the traditional leaders also have a great say. And they always say, sex is between heterosexuals for procreation. Until one of the senior chiefs was also taken to court by his wife, and to the civil court. And she was complaining that she was tired of having anal sex with the chief. So when those people write up they're ashamed, and that's when people think, okay, so this is reality. So how were you trying to procreate that way? It just goes to show that people are different. Life is going to be different. Choices are going to be different, whether heterosexual or homosexual. And at least we've now gotten those messages out, and no publicity is bad publicity. Even a negative story keeps bringing out the issue. When my president comes out and says, gays are lower than pigs and dogs, somebody somewhere is going to ask, but what are gays? And that's how I got to know. I asked my mother, what are lesbians? Because I had read it somewhere, because somebody had said something negative about lesbians. I probably thought it was a cardigan. Turns out it wasn't. It was a way of life, but it was also a way that a creator had created his own, in his own image. So, just to end, I think it is just packaging our stories in ways that have alternatives. You can embed your messages and messaging, depending on where you're coming from, in things that are seen as normal. And so when you embed, you're talking to people in a language that they know, but telling them new things that they will go home and think about and explore. Which brings me to a story that my father told me a long time ago. You need to then have good alternatives, not shoddy alternatives. So Johnny got a job in the supermarket, and an old woman comes in and says, do you have some marmalade? And Johnny says, no ma'am, we don't have marmalade. And the lady leaves and she's disgruntled. And the manager's heard the conversation. The manager goes to Johnny and says, Johnny, I heard that conversation. You should have said we don't have marmalade. But ma'am, we've got strawberry jam, we've got apricot, if you'd like to try one of those. That's alternative messaging. So another woman comes in and says, would you happen to have toilet paper by any means? No ma'am, we've run out of toilet paper, but we've got confetti, sandpaper, if you'd like to try one of those. So the idea is to give alternative messaging that is relevant and makes sense, rather than offer sandpaper, because that's going to make an awful mess. Thank you.
Thank you so much, brother. Let's give this panel a hand. Come on. I'm going to take that one back with me. That's good sermon fodder.